thank you for joining me for another Sunday Afternoons with Reverend Lucretia. I'm so glad you're here. So, the name of today's talk is I Have a Dream, and That's All That I Need. And the song is United We Stand by the Brotherhood of Man. So, we're going to be talking about the fact I have a dream, that freedom wins, that the divide is healed, that people treat each other with respect and dignity. The dream is all I need because it creates a vision, a blueprint for change. So I'm going to be honest, this wasn't the talk that I was planning to give this week, but last week happened, and what we saw on Wednesday was so unbearably difficult to watch. To see those images of the Capitol being destroyed, whatever you believe politically, it was horrendous to watch the violence that took place in our nation's capital against the people that were trying to perform their duty to go ahead and certify the election. It was painful to watch that. It stirred up all kinds of emotions in everybody. And so while this wasn't what I was originally going to talk about, I decided I needed to make a talk that addressed the issues of how to communicate with each other better, how to not see the other person as an enemy, how to move forward to get past this stuck place where we are right now. So we're going to be talking about that. If we all share the dream, we can get through this together. We're going to be talking about what unites us, a conservative's plea for working together, what America can be, scriptural references to how God wants us to treat each other. We're going to be talking about Aaron Sorkin's The Newsroom, where the pilot, there was a very big discussion on how America is not the greatest country that it used to be, but that it can be. So this week brought us all to the conclusion that something has to change. We can't go on like this any longer. It's up to us, every single one of us, with every single person that we need. We need to treat them differently. We need to treat them with respect and dignity. We need to find out how to have new conversations with each other. We have to be able to see beyond the chaos. It is our job to be the beacons of light. We have to stretch ourselves more fully than we have ever stretched ourselves before. It's like pregnant women who get to the place where they're getting ready to give birth and they are stretched way beyond their comfort zone. But in the end, there is a new life, and that's what it's all about. We're going to have to stretch ourselves to be better than we ever have been before, to be more open-hearted and more loving and more genuine and more authentic and more respectful. We're going to have to stretch ourselves. So in the original version for The Newsroom, in the pilot, there was a discussion and the lead character was asked whether or not why America was the greatest country in the world, and he said it's not. But he also said, it sure used to be. We stood up for what was right. We fought for moral reasons. We passed laws, struck down laws for moral reasons. We waged wars on poverty, not on poor people. We sacrificed, we cared about our neighbors, we put our money where our mouths were, and we never beat our chest. We built great big things, made ungodly technological advances, explored the universe, cured diseases, and we cultivated the world's greatest artists and the world's greatest economy. We reached for the stars and acted like men, aspired to intelligence, didn't belittle it. It didn't make us feel inferior. We didn't identify ourselves with who we voted for in the last election. We didn't scare so easy. So you all know the great Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream. He had an equally great speech called We Shall Overcome. And it was based on the spiritual that we've all known by that name. But in it he said, and this, with this faith, we will go out and adjourn the councils of despair and bring new light into dark chambers of pessimism. And we will be able to rise from the fatigue of despair to the buoyancy of hope. And this will be a great America. We will be the participants in making it so. And what he's telling us is that each individual is responsible. Every single one of us is responsible for being the change. So Dan Rather, the great American journalist, the former National Evening News anchor for over 25 years, he wrote several books called Rather Outspoken, The American Dream, The Camera Never Blinks, and What Unites Us. And he has a book, What Unites Us, and he was doing an interview about how he felt about America and how it was changing. And he says, we are having particularly tumultuous times right now. People are afraid, and they desperately are looking for a steady, reliable voice. I'm saying that we need to be that voice. He was asked about what tears us apart, and he says part of it is cable news. That news used to be just about reporting the facts, and now because of cable TV, there are so many different stations that people have more commentary discussing the way they feel about things rather than just the facts. He talked about social medias and the internet, and that we have lowered the quality of discourse in our conversations. He said that the leadership concentrates on what divides us, and they can exploit the divisions, for partisan ideological advantage and their ego, and they create a negative atmosphere saying that we are hopelessly divided. He says this is not true. There are still many more things that unite us than those that divide us. He says, I'm an optimist by nature. We've got problems, but we've got to start teaching our children about what it is that unites us. One of the noblest ideals of our country is that anybody from anywhere can be an American. Another thing that unites us is an ache in almost every American's heart for this to be an improving country, better for your children than it was for your lifetime, and better for your children's children. This is a uniter as well. We believe in the rule of law. It's one of the great things about our country. We have it inscribed in our monuments, equal justice under the law, and that's been the idea and the ideal of many Americans from the beginning. He was asked about the Me Too movement, and he says we absolutely have to change. There has to be a reshifting of society. It was pretty scary back then. Reflects the society as a whole. What we are dealing with now is long overdue, a reckoning. It has to stop. Going forward, there's going to have to be a big change, or we're going to pay a huge price, both individually and collectively. Men will have to stand up and start speaking out. It can't just be the women. He said, I appreciate more the longer I'm here the value of gratitude and humility and honesty. The fix is to take a deep breath. Remember the word steady. Hold steady and keep in mind the country as a whole is smarter than this. He has said, I'm reminded of the principles upon which the U.S. was founded, looking at the freedom that defines us, from the vote to the press, the values that have transformed us, from empathy to inclusion to service, the institutions that sustain us, such as public education, and the traits that helped us form our young country, such as the audacity to take on daunting challenges in science and medicine. Look at where we have been to help chart a way forward to heal our bitter divisions. Remind us of how we are, finally, one. We are a nation not only of dreamers, but also of fixers. We have looked at our land and people and said time and time again, this is not good enough. We can do better. And that's where we are right now, that we have to acknowledge we can do better. Inclusion, not assimilation, should be the key concept in ever seeking, a more perfect national union. Our nation is bound together more by ideals than by blood or land, and inclusion is in our cultural DNA. We should feel proud that we are not all the same, and that we can share our differences under the common umbrella of humanity. We will talk about how to become more united by learning to listen better and allow and celebrate different points of view. My dream is that we understand that just because we disagree, it doesn't mean we are enemies. It is not always us against them. People who disagree with us are not bad or wrong. They just have different priorities. So we're going to need to learn to talk to each other better, and we'll talk in this discussion about how to do that. In A Conservative's Plea, Let's Work Together, it's written by Arthur Brooks. He talks about the fact, so he was brought up in a very liberal Seattle. He was a professional French horn player, a musician. He toured with Charlie Byrd, and he also was part of the Barcelona Symphony Orchestra. When he was 27, he went home for Christmas, and he was talking with his families about the fact that his ideals had changed, that what mattered to him had changed so much, that he was interested in studying capitalism, him because he had a lifetime interest in poverty. So when he was younger, he had seen the picture in the National Geographic of that young boy whose stomach was distended so much from starvation. And he said there was grinding poverty around the world. He said he wanted to find out what happens to the world's poorest people. And as he studied, he discovered that from 1970 until today, the percentage of the world's population starvation had declined by 80%. That's not something we think of. We talk about starvation all the time as still being a really huge issue, and it is. And he wants to talk about how to fix that. But the fact is, we have made major, major progress. This was the greatest anti-poverty movement in our lifetime. 2 billion, with a B, billion people have been lifted out of poverty. And he wanted to find out how to move forward so that another 2 billion could be lifted out of poverty. He said it is not a political answer, it is an economic answer. That free enterprise system is what did it for the first 2 billion people. It's not perfect, it isn't everything, but that's what we need to get started. He studied capitalism, and he says it's not about accumulation, it's about aspiration. That the dreams are embedded in the system, and we need to share that with more people. He said, what an opportunity, coming together around ideals, liberals and conservatives, trying to help people who need us the most. So in an article in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, they talked about political motive asymmetry. And so psychologists have explained this as your ideology is based in love, but your opponent's is based in hate. In the U.S. today, the majority of Republicans and Democrats suffer from political motive asymmetry. My ideology is based on benevolence, but the other guys, they are evil and out to get me. And that's what we need to change. We can't progress as a society like this. And how to solve this is to study that there are differences, there are very different perspectives on what they think is important. Liberals care about poverty 59% more than they care about economic liberty. Conservatives care about liberty 28% more than they care about poverty. This is diversity. This is what lies our strength. We need each other if we want to help each other. There's no other way. Innovative thinking, social entrepreneurship, investment, and sustainable, responsible, ethical ways. We really need a new day in flexible ideology, less predictable. If you're always listening to the people that agree with you, that becomes very dangerous because then you're never able to hear new ideas. When we talk about lifting people up, we need to be able to pull from both points of view. 1, remember it's not good enough just to tolerate people who disagree. We have to remember that we need people to disagree in order to come up with new ideas. Number 2, be the person who blurs the lines, who is ambiguous, hard to classify, open to new ideas and to change. You will get 2 results. You get to be part of the solution, and you also get the, quote, ghastly, holy war of ideology that we are suffering under in this country, and turn it into a competition of ideas based on solidarity and mutual respect, unquote. We realizes that our big differences are really not that big after all when we become committed to trying to work together. We can never grow if we refuse to look outside of our box. The only way to find answers is to think of something new that we haven't thought of before. We need to listen more, respect more, and open our minds more. So there is a committee called the Common Ground Committee, and they have, their CEO is Bruce Bond. They wrote an article called Ending Political Polarization and Uniting America. They say they are about bringing light and not heat to public discourse. Light gives a sense of hope. They bring together panelists from opposite sides that agree and accept each other's perspectives, not to win an argument, but to work together to find ways to move forward. They have civil conversations. Donna Brazil, who is the former DNC chair, says, in order to do that, to foster civility, we need to find a new vocabulary. Michael Steele, who is the former RNC chair, says, civil conversations have got to start in the neighborhood, in our community. They've got to start most especially in our homes. There is so much emphasis on winning the argument, trying to get people to think differently. We need to think instead about how can we be part of the solution. We think of this as healing work, they say. There's less fighting and bickering and more sense of working together to overcome the problems that face us as a nation. We are a citizen-led nonprofit that inspires action on polarizing issues by bringing prominent leaders with opposing views together in a public forum to find common ground. Free of political agenda and financial influence, our singular focus is bringing light, not heat, to public discourse. We envision a nation no longer encumbered by anger and polarization that prevents us from moving forward on issues that matter. Okay, so they came up with 10 attributes of common grounders and how to put them to work. They said we've got to seek points of agreement through listening and productive conversations. So here are the 10 points. Number 1, identify and set aside personal biases. Be aware of yours. Be willing to test them out against new information. Recognize when you are closing your mind to what other people are saying. Number 2, commit to seek agreement, progress, and solutions. Number 3, listen first to learn perspectives and experiences. Active listening is the foundation of real communication. We've talked about that in several of our other talks, that you can't possibly build any bridges if you're not listening to each other well. You have to have the goal in mind of, I never thought of that before. Number 4, don't assume, but seek to understand the motives and intentions. Don't assume that you know what people are thinking or what they are saying. Ask them clarifying questions. Be sure that you understand what their true motivation is. Number 5, seek outcomes that all can live with. Don't compromise your principles. Be prepared to be flexible, but don't feel obligated to go along with something that violates your principles. Be prepared to agree to disagree. Number 6, accept that good people may disagree. All people may not share the same values. Don't equate the difference in values with whether the person is good or bad. So again, people have different ideas. That doesn't mean that they are good or bad themselves as human beings. Number 7, use and accept facts. Bring verified facts. Accept each other's verified facts. Examine carefully and don't reject them dogmatically. Number 8, stay respectful. Don't degrade the quality of the conversation. Eliminate pejoratives. Take a breath and shift the topics if necessary. Number 9, resist demonizing. There's no name calling or personal attacks. Watch your own thinking. When you hear attacks, don't accept them. And number 10, de-escalate hostile situations. Be alert to everyone's temperature. Shift the topics if you need to. If you find hostility rising, I found this really, really interesting. Identify and express what you appreciate about the other person's ideas and their intent. Turn it around and focus on the positive. So I wanted to go to scripture to see how God talks about treating each other and how we're supposed to be respectful and care for each other. And the first I read was Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Romans 12:18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live in peace with everyone. James 3:18 says, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So the word peace in the Old Testament, you all know it. It means shalom. You've heard it a million times. That means completeness or soundness. It can mean neighborliness or well-being and security, or the reward of a mind that is stayed on God. It is linked with honest dealing and with true justice. 1 Peter 2:17 says, show proper respect to everyone. Love the families of believers. Fear God. Romans 12:10 says, love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing favor. Another translation says, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God forgave you. James 1:19 says, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Galatians 6:12 says, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." So here we have scripture over and over and over again telling us that it's about bringing peace and understanding, respecting each other, showing honor, listening to each other, helping each other, and treating each other with dignity. So in Unity Magazine, Stephen Dinan wrote an article called America's Sacred Code. And he says, America has a guiding template. The seeds were planted in the founding documents, liberty and justice for all, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. We are the melting pot for the world. There are more cultures in this one country than in any other. Transpartisan movement he wrote about in a book, and it's called Sacred America, Sacred World. I will leave links for the books that I talk about. I will leave links as well as for the committee, the .org committee. I will leave the links for those in the description as well. So, Sacred America, Sacred World, where there is a higher identity that is bringing us together. Learning from different viewpoints and exploring possible solutions has got to be our priority. You need to take a strong stand, do it from a deep respect for others and for everyone's single right to have different perspectives. We need to demonstrate having a higher path, seeing the truth and the value in each political perspective. Working to create dialogue makes us more whole. The work of transformation first requires admitting what we've lied to ourselves about or what we've hidden and not wanted to own. This is the catalyst for birthing a more enlightened self. It's the same for the country. So when we're exploring what it is that we need to change, we need to explore what it is as a country that we've hidden. Certainly that's come out quite a bit in the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on right now. So it's the same for the country. We've got to explore what it is that we've lied to ourselves about and what it is that we've hidden, and we have to bring it all out into the light. We're still growing. We need to become a more mature, sacred, wiser, fully empowered democracy. We must hold the faith that we can evolve to the next level. Jim Blake is the CEO of Unity Worldwide, and he talked about standing together. He put a message out there, and he says, we need profound change that preserves and protects the human rights of every individual in the country. Chaos is everywhere we look. Unprecedented national unrest. We need to walk together and forge a new path forward, ushering in the great change that is so desperately needed right now. Together, we need to listen deeply, grieve, pray, connect with empathy, have dialogue, share information, lift the consciousness and the conversation. May our prayers and our dialogue be transformed into spiritual right action that will create long-lasting and meaningful change. So this week has been rough, very, very rough, and I really believe that we still have some hard times ahead of us, but I believe that we can be the beacons of light. I believe that we can be the change that we want to see. We are in a tunnel right now, and we see darkness everywhere. Part of the problem is we don't know how long this tunnel is. We don't know when it's going to end. Our job is to hold on to the light. Our job is to keep the faith. Our job to remember that there is a God that's in charge of all of the details. Our job is to set the example of how to have better conversations, how to stay open-minded when all we want to do is scream and yell. It's up to us, and we are strong enough, brave enough, resilient enough, and capable enough. This will end. It has to. This nation is built on a solid ideals of overcoming and reaching deep inside ourselves for strength that we didn't even know that we had. It's our time to be the change that we want to see. Remember, united we stand, divided we fall. We can do this. One day at a time, we look at ourselves, we look at each other, we treat ourselves with respect and with dignity. Remember at all times, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be. Thank you so much. I hope these were helpful words for you. If you would like to learn more about my ministry, you can go to lostinsideministry.com. If you would like to go to my YouTube channel, I have recorded versions of all of the other talks that I've done, and I have a podcast called Grateful Living as well. Thank you so very much. I send you on your way with many blessings.